Hi, it's Keith Bates here, and in the previous videos, so there have been two of them, I've been talking about ledgers, and I've been mainly focusing on the Ethereum method for creating and dealing with ledgers. So I didn't want to leave Bitcoin out of the party, and today's video is looking at how Bitcoin manages the recording of balances that different people have. And Bitcoin uses a different method from the simple let's have a list of names and a list of balances. Bitcoin uses what is called a transaction, an unspent transaction model for ownership of the coins that the blockchain instantiates. Now, when I put it like that, some of you are going to go, the what of what? Well, the way to look at it is that instead of having a spreadsheet or a table created in the blockchain and then putting addresses in it and having balances against them, which is a very simple and quick way to work out how much different people own, Bitcoin uses the idea of the transaction or the transferal of the assets rather than just saying this is what they are. And the best analogy I have for this is the idea of coupons. So in Bitcoin, when a miner mines a block, they get the right to create a coupon that says, I have this many Bitcoins to spend. And in the early days, what they could fill in there was, I have 50 Bitcoins to spend. Then every 4 years, the amount of the reward halves. But basically, for every block that was created for the first 4 years, each miner got one of these coupons. And then when they wanted to spend their Bitcoins, what they would do is they would take this coupon and pass it on to the address that they were transferring their Bitcoins to. So in that sense, you're not transferring Bitcoins. What you're doing is you're transferring the right to transfer Bitcoins, even though the Bitcoins themselves don't actually exist. So that's a bit counterintuitive and a bit odd, but just think of them as coupons. It's kind of a bit like the odd thing that's written on £5 notes in the United Kingdom. On a £5 note in the United Kingdom, it says, I promise to pay the bearer on demand £5. So that's kind of weird. You have a £5 banknote that says that what it gives you is the right to demand £5 when you already have it. And again, when you think about that, it seems a bit odd. It does, however, work, and that is how Bitcoin works. It's these are kind of unspent transactions, coupons that have not been used, and then when you use them for you, they become spent transactions because you no longer have them. But to the person that you give them to, they become a new unspent transaction from then. So it's like handing £5 notes on and on and on. And as I said, that's a different data structure than the list of names, list of balances. Now, the interesting thing about Bitcoin is that, therefore, if you want to spend an amount of Bitcoins that you don't have an exact change coupon for, the way that is handled is that you can actually kind of take several coupons if you don't have enough individual ones, or you can take one big one if it's worth more than the amount that you're transacting, and kind of tear it up into two smaller ones, and then you keep one of the smaller ones and you use the other smaller one to hand it on. So they're like coupons with stamps attached to them, and you can tear off individual stamps to extend the analogy further. So then you may be wondering, well then, how could we subvert this? And the answer to that is an interesting piece of research that myself and Bjorn Bjerk did a couple of years ago, I think now, which was noticing a weird quirk in the Bitcoin system. Namely that normally a transaction has to have an input, a particular coupon handed to it, in order for you to then have subsequent transactions. But there are two weird transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain. One is the Coinbase transaction, and that's the transaction whereby a miner is given permission to create these coupons, and that's necessary because without that there would never be any Bitcoins brought into existence. And it's a clever little bit of work by Nakamoto to use that mechanism for the creation of the assets of the Bitcoin blockchain. The second one is the miner transaction fee. So what you're meant to do when you have a transaction is you're meant to say, here are all my inputs that are going into that transaction, and here are the outputs that go to the various people that I'm sending Bitcoins to. And if there are any bits left over that I haven't specified where they're going to go, well, they can go to the miner. But That's the one transfer that isn't specifically saying this coupon is going to the miner. What actually happens is that your coupons are all gathered together into big piles. They're shunted off to the various different people. There's a little pile of remaining coupons, and the miner now has the right to let those disappear, but create an equivalent amount in their Coinbase transaction. So rather than being allowed to mine 50 bitcoins at the beginning of the launch of Bitcoin, or now it's 6.25 bitcoins, their Coinbase transaction is allowed to, at the present time, create 6.25 bitcoins plus an equivalent number of coupons to the ones that were not used and therefore were discarded and destroyed. And what's interesting about that is it decouples some of the transactions. What I mean by that is that in Bitcoin, normally you can trace the flow of the creation of every individual Satoshi, which is the smallest unit of a Bitcoin, from its creation by a miner mining a block through its transferal from address to address to address. And then eventually it can get destroyed by ending up as part of the transaction fee for a miner. And subsequently, a new identical twin is created through the Coinbase transaction in that very same block where the history and provenance of that particular Satoshi is suddenly lost. And one of the things that Björn Berg and I observed was that this could be used as a technique for decoupling bitcoins from their transaction history, and therefore might offer an opportunity for money laundering to miners who would like to use that technique. As it turns out, there's still enough forensic evidence there for you to say, well, this is actually a mining transaction. This is how they've destroyed some tainted bitcoins that have a shady history and created some new clean ones. Because it's happening in the same block, you can actually say, well, effectively those two things are linked, even if they're not actually empirically linked within the block. So there's an example of a ledger system with a different transaction structure that still has some quirks that appear. And what I'll do is I'll put a link to the research paper that Björn Berg and I published on this very topic. But I think that wraps it up for today. You can see that ledgers are a fascinating topic, and I'm sure that there's opportunity for many, many people to study both their actual impact and our psychological and social interpretation of them. So PhD students out there might be a fruitful topic to go and look at if you haven't got one. That's it for today, and I'll see you all in the next video soon. Bye for now.